Have you ever felt that unsettling silence right before a secret breaks the world apart? Now imagine this: for over 10,000 years, humanity has worshipped its defenders, the Space Marines, believing them to be incorruptible, divine, perfect. But what if I told you that their perfection was never human, and that the truth behind their creation could collapse the Imperium itself? Most people will never hear this story, not because it's lost, but because it's forbidden. Billions live and die under their protection, never questioning what really beats inside that cobalt armor. You see, it isn't faith that keeps people safe. It's fear. And fear, when left unchallenged, grows roots deeper than truth. This isn't another legend of heroism. This is a record pulled from classified astropathic transmissions, encoded and buried under 17 layers of inquisitorial silence. I wasn't meant to hear it. You weren't meant to hear it. But once you do, you'll never see them the same way again. Because beneath every battle cry, beneath every hymn to the Emperor, there's a second voice, older, hungrier, and infinitely patient. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It evolves. And when I finally translated the fragments of that whisper, I understood why people vanish for knowing too much. The numbers alone are staggering: more than 3 million active Astartes spread across 1,000 chapters each, carrying the same genetic seed. A seed that was never fully understood, and perhaps was never meant to be. If even 1% of them is compromised, the entire foundation of the Imperium collapses overnight. That's not a prophecy, that's math. So why hasn't anyone stopped it? Why do the Inquisitors stay silent even when the signs are clear? Because the truth doesn't just threaten power, it threatens belief. The kind of belief entire galaxies are built on. This story isn't about saints or monsters. It's about what happens when humanity's greatest defenders start changing into something else. And the most terrifying part, they might not even know it themselves. If you've ever trusted the wrong hero, or wondered whether the protectors you prayed to could one day turn their weapons inward, stay. Don't scroll. Don't look away. Because in the next few minutes, you're going to hear a first-hand confession that was never supposed to survive. It's raw, it's unfiltered, and it's the closest thing to truth left in this galaxy. I'll show you what the records hid. I'll show you what the Ultramarines, the Emperor's perfect sons, have been hiding in their gene vaults for centuries. And when you understand what their evolution truly means, you'll realize this isn't just their secret, it's ours. The only question left is, what will you do once you know? For as long as I can remember, faith was not a choice. It was air. On Hydra, the sky itself glowed with banners of devotion, cathedrals the size of mountains, each one humming with hymns to the Emperor. Children were taught to bow before they could speak. Soldiers were buried beneath marble engraved not with their names but with his. We were told that the Space Marines were his angels made flesh, the living proof that humanity could still touch divinity. Even now I can still hear the thunder of their arrival, the rhythmic tremor that shook the ferrocrete beneath my feet. When they marched, it felt like the planet itself was praying. Their cobalt armor caught the sunlight like ocean waves frozen mid-storm. To us, they weren't men. They were legends sculpted in metal and faith. Every adult on Hydra had their story, a sighting, a blessing, a rumor of a Marine who once smiled at them. My father would say, if the angels walk among us, the Emperor has not abandoned his sons. My mother only nodded, whispering prayers so soft they sounded like breathing. We needed to believe that. Everyone did. Because the galaxy beyond our skies was endless and full of things that did not love us back. That's why the Space Marines mattered. They weren't just protectors. They were proof. Proof that order could triumph over chaos, that flesh could become divine through discipline, and that faith itself could wear armor. We didn't question. We didn't doubt. To doubt was to invite the abyss to look back. And yet somewhere beneath the hymns and banners, something inside me whispered, perfection has a cost. I just didn't know who was paying it. But faith rarely shatters in a single moment. It erodes quietly, grain by grain, until the light you prayed to feels like a distant star. And on one silent night, aboard a ship that should have been holy, I began to hear that erosion. It didn't come with thunder. It came with a whisper. It began, as most heresies do, with silence. Aboard the Dominus Vindictus, silence was sacred, the pause between hymns, the breath before the cannon's roar. But this silence was different. It wasn't reverent. It was waiting. I first noticed it during the ship's night cycle. The hum of the plasma conduits had dimmed, and the usual murmur of mechanical prayers was gone. Only the faint vibration of the engines remained, like a heartbeat too slow to sustain life. That was when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. At first I thought it was interference, a static pulse from the Vox relays, but beneath the distortion there was rhythm, words, a voice too measured to be random noise. I adjusted the psychic dampeners, expecting to catch a routine transmission. Instead, I heard something else. Something that shouldn't exist in Imperial space. It was a chant, deep, deliberate, and utterly alien. Each word thudded inside my mind like a drumbeat in reverse, pulling instead of pushing. I caught fragments: cosituare, father of flesh, hidden seed. Then the connection snapped, as if something on the other end had noticed me listening. The chill that followed wasn't physical. It came from the warp, that place between thought and nightmare. My blood turned to ice as I realized what I'd done. I had eavesdropped on a prayer that wasn't meant for the Emperor. In that moment, I told myself it was an error, a psychic echo, some fragment of corrupted data. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had touched something that was never supposed to be touched. For days after, the whispers didn't return, but the silence did. Every corridor I walked felt heavier, the air too thick, the shadows too watchful. The Marines still moved with their usual precision, but when I passed them, I caught glimpses of their faces behind the helmets too. Still, too calm, as if waiting for instructions I couldn't hear. And though I told myself it was my imagination, I could swear that sometimes when they prayed, the words didn't match their lips. Faith cracks quietly before it breaks. It disguises fear as obedience and denial as devotion. I didn't know it then, but that night was the first fracture, a hairline split that would soon run straight through the heart of everything I believed in. And once it starts, faith doesn't heal. It spreads. Curiosity is a fragile thing aboard a warship. Too much of it, and you end up spaced. Too little, and you go blind. I told myself I'd imagined the chant, that the warp had merely played another cruel trick. But lies lose their power the more you repeat them. Within a week, the question began to rot inside my skull. Who were they praying to? I started small. During sanctioned transmissions, I tuned the psychic amplifiers slightly wider, pretending to compensate for interference. Most of the time, I heard nothing but the expected static relay pings, astropathic noise, the usual mechanical psalms. Yet sometimes beneath those layers, something pulsed. A heartbeat that didn't belong to the ship. A rhythm that remembered me. I stopped sleeping. Every dream became the same corridor, endless metallic, echoing with whispers. Faces of Marines flickered past like reflections in a broken mirror, eyes glinting, lips moving in perfect unison, and always that word, cosituare, hanging in the air like the smell of ozone before lightning. One evening, while meditating to clear my mind, I felt it again, soft, deliberate, impossibly near. It wasn't a voice this time. It was intent. A tug on the edges of my consciousness, inviting patient. I pulled back, forcing my mind into the Emperor's light, reciting the litanies until my throat bled. The pull didn't stop. It waited. That was when I began writing. Every anomaly, every flicker of psychic distortion, every Marine whose aura felt wrong. I hid the notes inside my shrine's hollow base beneath the image of the Emperor himself. It was foolish, heretical even, but I needed proof that I wasn't insane. And yet, in the quiet between shifts, a truth I could not bear began to form. The corruption wasn't a sudden infection. It was ritual, methodical, old. Something vast and ancient was shaping these warriors, and perhaps had been since the day their kind was born. Curiosity doesn't kill quickly. It coils around you, whispering that knowledge is safety, that understanding can save you. I believed it. I believed that if I could see the pattern, I might stop whatever was coming. But the deeper I looked, the more the pattern began to look back. Faith had cracked. Now reason began to follow. And somewhere in that widening fracture, the truth waited, breathing patient, alive. Sometimes curiosity isn't discovery, it's invitation. And on the 47th night, I finally accepted. The 47th night cycle felt colder than the void itself. Even the ship's recycled air carried a weight to it, a metallic taste that clung to my tongue like blood. My breath came out in small clouds as I moved down the deserted corridor, robes brushing against steel that thrummed with hidden machinery. The Dominus Vindictus never truly slept, but this was the hour it pretended to. Every step I took echoed louder than it should have. The sound bounced off the walls, swallowed by the ship's vastness. The further I went, the less human it felt, the less imperial. The devotional icons thinned, replaced by bare metal. Then came something stranger carvings. Old sigils cut into the bulkheads, their edges smoothed by time. Not Gothic, not sanctioned. Some glowed faintly when my hand passed over them, as if recognizing the touch of a mind. I told myself it was only residual psychic feedback. Lies are easy in the dark. My heart pounded as I approached the maintenance shafts that led toward the gene vault decks, the sacred heart of every Astartes vessel. No mortal was supposed to go there. Even the ship's servitors avoided it, their mechanical obedience overridden by some higher command. But I had spent years learning the language of locks, both mechanical and mental. I whispered the right litany, pressed my hand against the runic seal, and felt it yield with a sigh like a lung exhaling its last prayer. The door opened to a corridor I didn't recognize. Here the air was different, heavy, humid, alive. The walls weren't smooth anymore. They pulsed faintly as if something beneath the metal was breathing. Pipes ran along the ceiling like veins. The temperature dropped further with each step until the condensation on my skin turned to frost. Somewhere ahead, voices murmured. Not loud enough to be conversation, but steady, the kind of sound made by a mind too large for words. I stretched my psychic senses just enough to taste it. The flavor was wrong, not the sharp tang of warp corruption, but something deeper, more organized. I hid in the shadows as two figures passed, massive, armored, unmistakable. Space Marines. They moved with mechanical precision, but their mental signatures were fractured, vibrating like strings stretched too tight. Between their thoughts, I caught that same word again, the one that haunted my dreams. Costituare. They didn't see me. Or perhaps they did and simply didn't care. When they vanished into the lower decks, I followed, drawn by a force stronger than fear. The smell grew sweet and rotten. Candles burned ahead, their flames guttering in air that felt thick with reverence and decay. I realized then that I wasn't sneaking into forbidden territory. I was descending into the heart of a living organism, one that had learned to wear a ship's skin. Somewhere below, something was awake, and it was calling its children home. Curiosity had gotten me this far. What waited beyond that door would erase every illusion I had left. Because faith once wounded doesn't die, it mutates. And I was about to see what it had become. The door ahead was massive black metal, polished like glass, etched with sigils that hurt to look at. I didn't touch it right away. Even through the air, it radiated presence, the way ancient monoliths do when they remember every prayer ever spoken before them. My fingers hovered inches from the surface. The hum in the back of my skull became a pulse. Then, without a word or command, the lock released itself. The door slid open on a breath of cold air, heavy with incense and rot. I stepped inside. The chamber was vast, cathedral-sized, lit only by candles that burned blue instead of gold. Hundreds of them, their wax translucent like the skin of larvae. Shadows trembled on the walls, bending and reforming as though alive. The smell was sweet, nauseatingly, so like fruit left too long in the sun. At the center rose a circular dais of obsidian slick with condensation. Around it knelt 13 Space Marines, their armor painted in the proud cobalt of the Ultramarines, but scarred with unfamiliar markings. Their helmets rested at their sides, faces pale as bone, eyes closed, lips moving in prayer. I froze, Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the psychic pull was stronger, an unseen gravity dragging my consciousness toward the ritual. They were chanting in high Gothic at first. Then the words slipped. Cadence broke. Tongues twisted. The sound that replaced it wasn't language, it was anatomy. Clicking, hissing, the wet articulation of something growing. In the center of the dais lay what looked like a sarcophagus. But it wasn't built for the dead. It was breathing. The metal lid slid open with a sigh, revealing not a body but a column of light pale blue shimmering alive. It gathered, condensed, and formed a shape that defied symmetry. Limbs too long, skin that wasn't skin, a head that split into segments like the petals of a flower made of bone, and eyes, hundreds of them blinking in impossible rhythm. Cosituare. The word tore through the air as all 13 voices spoke in unison, both aloud and inside my skull. The creature answered in thought, its voice scraping against my consciousness like metal dragged across glass. My sons, it said, the seed matures, the flesh prepares the way. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but my body didn't remember how. My mind hovered between terror and awe. For a heartbeat, I felt what they felt, belonging, a perfect, monstrous unity. Then the moment passed. The thing's many eyes turned toward the door toward me. Every candle flickered, as if the room inhaled. I ripped my mind back into my body and stumbled into the corridor, slamming the seal shut behind me. My pulse thundered so loud it drowned the ship's hum. I pressed my palm to my chest to feel something still human beating there. What I'd seen wasn't heresy, it was evolution. And evolution doesn't ask permission. Faith had failed me. Reason had betrayed me. Now all that was left was survival. Some horrors end when you look away. This one began the moment I did. I don't remember running back to my quarters. I remember walls bending around me, corridors stretching, lights flickering in rhythms that matched my heartbeat. The ship no longer felt mechanical. It felt aware. Every bulkhead hummed with what I now recognized as breath. The Dominus Vindictus was alive, and I was trespassing inside its veins. I sealed my door, collapsed beside the cot, and vomited until bile turned to air. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that column of light, the way its shape pulsed like a heartbeat, the way its voice lived inside my skull. I whispered litanies until my throat cracked, but the words felt hollow. Faith was a wall of paper trying to hold back a flood. When I could finally think again, I started writing. I documented everything, the hour, the location, the formation of the 13, the voices' cadence. I recorded the sigils I had seen etched into the armor, some curved like DNA strands, others like insect carapaces curling inwards. My handwriting slanted uneven. The ink blotched where my hands trembled. Still I wrote. Because if I didn't, then what I saw would belong only to me, and I no longer trusted my own mind to hold it. But the ship knew. The next day, the apothecary Vallis visited my chamber. His tone was clinical polite, but his eyes emperor. Those eyes didn't blink in rhythm with his words. He asked if I was well, whether the psychic fluctuations had subsided. I lied. I told him I had been praying too long, that fatigue had made me hallucinate. He nodded slowly, almost kindly, before pressing 2 fingers to his temple, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. That night I felt it. Not a sound, not footsteps, a presence. Someone or something stood outside my door for hours. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The silence felt thick enough to drown in. When I finally gathered the courage to look, there was nothing but a faint smear on the metal, 3 long claw-like grooves that hadn't been there before. I should have destroyed my journal then. Instead, I hid it inside the ventilation shaft above my shrine, wrapped in cloth soaked with sanctified oil. If they came for me, I wanted something to remain. Proof, testimony, warning. Every whisper on the ship now sounded like that word. Every Marine's prayer felt a little too synchronized. Every reflection seemed to linger a heartbeat too long after I'd moved. I realized something cruel. It wasn't madness. It was attention. They had noticed me. And once the angels notice you, there's no such thing as escape, only delay. Fear changes shape as it matures. It starts as panic, then shrinks into silence. And silence aboard the Dominus Vindictus was never empty. It was listening. It happened during the ship's artificial dawn, when the light panels brightened in slow gradients, imitating sunrise no human would ever see again. I was kneeling before my shrine, reciting words I no longer believed, when the door exploded inward. The blast hurled me across the room. The pressure crushed the air from my lungs before the sound even reached me. 4 space marines filled the doorway, their armor painted the blue of heaven and the red of war. Behind them stood Valus the apothecary, his white helmet gleaming like a skull. They didn't shout commands. They didn't need to. Their presence was command enough. Tyrant Lord Valus said through his Vox Grill voice, distorted metallic calm. You are charged with unauthorized access to restricted data archives. You will surrender yourself for interrogation. There was no point pretending. The journal was hidden, but I was not. I raised my trembling hands, palms out. I'll come peacefully, I said. But I must speak to Captain Amon. He must know what you're doing endangers the Imperium itself. A sound came from Valas, then laughter or something wearing its shape. It buzzed like a swarm of insects scraping their wings together. Oh, you will speak with him, he said. He is expecting you. 2 Marines stepped forward, seizing my arms. Their grip was like a vice-cold, unyielding. My feet barely touched the floor as they dragged me into the corridor. The ship seemed quieter now, like it too was holding its breath. Every hatch they passed sealed itself behind us with a heavy clang, trapping me in a tunnel of inevitability. They didn't take me to a brig. They took me downward past decks I'd never seen, through halls lined with statues whose faces were worn smooth as if erased by time or shame. The light grew dimmer, the air heavier. The scent, sweet rotting, returned. When we finally stopped, I recognized the door. The same black metal, the same sigils that burned when I looked at them. Only this time the door opened for me. Inside, the chamber pulsed with light and shadow just as before. The candles had multiplied. The air was thick with smoke and whispers. And at the center, waiting on the obsidian dais, was Captain Amon. His face was bare now and wrong. The symmetry of humanity had abandoned him. His jaw moved like a hinge unfit for flesh, and his eyes, too many, watched me from different planes of focus. The Marines forced me to my knees before him. My heart hammered, but my voice held. Why, I asked, why betray everything we are? Amon smiled, and when he spoke it was not one voice, but several layered, harmonious obscene. Betrayal, he said. No astropath. We are fulfilling the design that made us. Fulfillment, I whispered. My throat felt raw, every word scraping out like gravel. You speak of design as if corruption were destiny. Amon's head tilted, not in mockery, but almost in pity. You misunderstand, Tyron. We are not corrupted. We are completed. He stepped forward, and I finally saw the full extent of his transformation. His skin shimmered faintly beneath the chamber's sickly light. Not flesh anymore, but something layered, organic armor that pulsed like breathing steel. The air around him rippled with psychic pressure. Even the candles bent toward him, their flames drawn to his gravity. The Emperor created us in his image, I said. Sons of Guilliman, defenders of mankind. Amon's smile widened, and something beneath his cheeks clicked, insectoid and deliberate. The Emperor, he said slowly, was not the beginning. He was the continuation of a bargain struck before his kind ever walked Terra. The Primarchs were not sons. They were vessels, architects in training. The chamber vibrated with resonance, not from machinery, but from thought. The 13 Marines knelt again around the dais, their armor plates shifting like living scales. I felt their minds open a psychic chorus, bound by something older than oaths. The being you call Kosituare Aiman continued, was ancient when the warp was young. He is not demon, not god, not Xenos. He is evolution given form. The Emperor did not banish him. He harnessed him, fragmented his essence, and seeded it within the Primarchs. Each chapter carries a piece of him, a shard of the grand design. My voice trembled. That's heresy. Amon laughed, a sound layered with multiple pitches, human and not. Heresy is just a word spoken by those afraid of change. We are not defying the Emperor Astropath. We are becoming what he intended, the bridge between man and the divine, between mortality and what waits beyond it. Behind him the sarcophagus pulsed again, the blue light brightening into an almost blinding white. Shapes moved within shadows, swimming in embryonic rhythm. The air tasted metallic. I could feel it, a psychic pressure building like a storm behind glass. "Do you know why the Imperium stagnates?" Aemon asked softly. "Because faith became preservation, not progression. The Emperor dreamed of ascension, not worship. But they caged his dream, bound it in cathedrals, buried it beneath fear. We will finish what he began." "You're rewriting creation," I said. "No." Aemon whispered, his voice almost tender. "We're remembering it." He gestured toward me, and 2 Marines tightened their grip on my arms. "You saw what you shouldn't have seen. That makes you valuable. Your mind, your connection to the warp, it will help refine the next generation. Flesh that speaks across stars. Thought that transcends form." I struggled, but their strength was absolute. My knees dug into the cold stone. "You're monsters," I spat. Aemon leaned close, his breath warm, sweet, wrong. "No, Tyron. Monsters devour. We create." 2 of the Marines forced me upright, dragging me across the obsidian floor. My boots scraped against carved symbols that pulsed faintly beneath the surface, glowing in rhythm with the chamber's breath. The scent of incense thickened until it stung my eyes. Every candle flickered in the same synchronized beat, like the room itself had a pulse. Valas, the apothecary, approached, his narthecium extended, a spider-like frame of blades and syringes. His helmet was gone now, revealing a face that could no longer claim humanity. The jaw had split into 3 segments that clicked as he spoke, and his eyes had begun to merge into a single glistening orb that rotated independently inside its socket. "Your psychic potential is extraordinary," he said, voice buzzing through overlapping frequencies. "You will be the seedbed for the next phase. You should be honored. Honor." The word meant nothing anymore. I tried to speak, to curse him, but my voice was gone, drowned beneath terror and exhaustion. They strapped me to a metal table, the surface slick and cold. Tubes descended from the ceiling like roots searching for soil. The apothecary's assistants, if they could still be called that, moved with eerie precision, their armor whispering as it flexed and shuddered with each step. One inserted a needle into my spine. Another fastened a crown of electrodes around my skull. When the first surge hit, pain didn't come immediately, it bloomed. A warmth spreading from my neck outward, flooding my limbs until every nerve sang with unbearable clarity. My body arched against the restraints. I couldn't even scream. Then came the second wave, colder, slower, deliberate. I felt them inside my mind, pulling at thoughts the way surgeons pull at tissue. Memories slid away, my parents on Hydra, the hymns of my childhood, the sound of the Emperor's name. Each fragment was catalogued, stripped, and replaced with emptiness. Aemon stood above me, his many eyes reflecting my agony like a hall of mirrors. "Do not fear," he said. "You will not die. You will transform. Through you, the warp will find new vessels. Through you, the Emperor's silence will end." My blood felt heavier, thick with alien rhythm. My heart began to beat out of sync with itself, one pulse, human one. Something else. Veins rose beneath my skin, glowing faintly blue. The restraints creaked as my body convulsed. I reached for the only anchor left to me, the Emperor's light. But when I called, nothing answered. Only static. And behind that static, a whisper. "You are not being destroyed, Tyron. You are being rewritten." The world dissolved into color and noise. Faces blurred, time fractured. For a moment I saw myself from above my body, splayed open the apothecary's tools, glistening with fluids that were no longer entirely blood. Then everything went black. But in the blackness, something burned. A spark, small, defiant, alive. Even stripped of memory, of faith, of form, I still was. And that was enough. Darkness came first. Not the simple absence of light, but the kind that folds reality in on itself. Thick, endless, alive. I should have been gone. A memory erased. a whisper devoured by the warp. But instead I floated in that black ocean, weightless and aware. Fragments of me drifted apart like embers, yet somehow I still knew my name. Tyran Lore, Astropath, Witness, Warning. The hum returned, the heartbeat of the Dominus Vindictus. I reached for it, desperate for something to hold on to. And the moment I touched its psychic current, I understood the ship wasn't a vessel anymore. It was a womb. Every circuit, every conduit, every prayer etched into its hull had become part of the transformation. The Space Marines hadn't just been changing themselves, they were changing everything around them. I pushed deeper into the ship's astropathic choir, its psychic network that once amplified messages for light years. It glowed before me like a web of fire. My consciousness merged with it, fusing thought with machinery, memory with signal. For the first time, I didn't need a voice. I was the voice, and so I began to speak, not to men, but to the stars. Every horror I had seen, every name, every word of that alien prayer. I burned it into the warp, compressed into pure meaning, hurled through the void with all the strength my shattered soul could muster. Most of me broke apart in the process. Each fragment carried a piece of the message, scattering like meteors across the Imperium. Some would dissolve in chaos consumed by demons. Some would echo forever between forgotten worlds. But maybe one would reach someone who could still act. Someone who could still believe. I saw worlds flash by in my dissolution battlefields lit by bolter fire cities chanting the Emperor's name, priests preaching devotion to protect them from doubt. And among them all I saw the Space Marines, our perfect angels kneeling in quiet temples, their armor gleaming, their voices unified, still praying, still evolving, still hiding. The warp whispered around me, "Change cannot be stopped, only delayed." And I realized then the Emperor's design had always been a paradox. To save mankind, he had to create something more than human. But more and less are only words, and evolution doesn't care for semantics. Perhaps this was never corruption. Perhaps this was destiny. Still, I sent my warning even as I faded, even as my identity unraveled into code and starlight. They are not what you think. They never were. Watch them. Listen. When faith begins to whisper instead of sing, run. I don't know who will receive this. Perhaps you already have. If you're hearing these words, then some fragment of me survived long enough to reach your mind. And if so, I beg you do not let this fade into silence. The truth only lives if someone remembers it. So share this message, speak it, write it in the margins of holy texts, whisper it in the places where light fails, repeat it until even angels tremble. Because the Space Marines are still changing, and soon their evolution will no longer be hidden. I was Tyran Lore. I saw the truth. Now you have seen it too. Don't let the Imperium bury this. Don't let faith become blindness. And above all, don't look away.